So that's part of the franchisor process. Is it's just there's a lot of relational management, and you have to hold them accountable for sticking to the standards of your brand. You don't get to build a Subway sandwich two different ways. There's only one way to build a Subway sandwich, right? And so
Right.
you're managing all of that. I will also tell you that the setup of becoming a franchisor and starting is super expensive. You've got these franchise disclosure documents that are you hundreds of thousands of dollars and get it set up and get it ready. And it basically says all through this document, says legal fees to get that set up and get it ready, or $50,000 in legal fees to get it set up and get it ready. And it basically says all through this document, all the different ways the franchisee is going to lose money. And they have to sign this disclosure because there's been so much fraud in this space. And so the feds are up in your business all the time while you're dealing with this, Federal Trade Commission. So franchising can be a huge deal. It can be a boon.
So what he's talking about there is the fact that franchising is regulated by the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, which spot on. It is. He talks about the FDD, the franchise disclosure document, and how, basically it's just a long list of all the ways the franchisor can, I forget exactly how he put it, but charge the franchisee money. Not really. It's a contract, right? It's a contract just like you would have if you went into any other type of a business partnership. It's a contract. If you own a home, you've signed a mortgage agreement. That's a contract between you and the bank. Yeah, when you sit down and read it, if you sat down, and most people don't even read their mortgage agreement, but if you sat down and read your mortgage agreement, it sounds very scary, right? The bank is absolutely got all the leverage in that scenario, right? That is a one-sided agreement, or at least heavily favoring the mortgage company. And franchise agreements are no different. But it's what I tell people is, listen, if you're going to buy a house, right? Number one, you should have done all your due diligence correctly up front, right? And, one of the things you should be very confident is that you are in a financial position to be able to pay the mortgage, and you're going into that agreement with every intention to honor your side of the agreement, to pay the mortgage every month and pay it on time. And, you're fully intending to do everything in your power to make that happen. Right. And if that's the case, the vast majority, if not everything that's scary in that mortgage agreement never even comes into play. Right. And it's the same thing with a franchise agreement in pretty much every analogy that you could compare it to with something like a mortgage, where yes, there's a lot of things that are going to be listed in that agreement that are if-then scenarios, right? Those if-then scenarios are there to protect everybody that's involved. So most of the things that would be scary to someone in a franchise agreement are not going to come into play as long as the franchisee is operating within the terms of the agreement, doing everything within their power to, be successful. And I can tell you this, I've been on the franchisor side. I've worked for multiple national franchisors, been on, parts of the leadership team. No franchisor is sitting around looking for reasons to throw the book at a franchisee. And if an issue arises, let's say it's related to, underperformance of a franchise location, right? The franchisor's first step, and this is all my experience, right? I'm sure there's exceptions to this, but in my experience, if you have an underperforming franchisee, and let's say that by the letter of the franchise agreement, they are performing at a level that would allow the franchisor to void their contract. No franchisor wants to have to do that, right? Their first option is going to be, hey, how can we help? How can we help you get this on track? How can we help you get this where you need to be? And it's again, in all of my experience, it's only after every other option has been exhausted that the franchisor would then terminate a franchisee. And that kind of leads me into, a few thoughts on the FTC regulations, where he says, it's highly regulated because there's been so much fraud. Maybe. I mean, I kind of look at this as, yes, there are some horror stories out there if you go searching for them with, franchise companies that have essentially defrauded their franchisees. But to me, it's kind of like plane crashes, right? Like, you don't see on the news every time a plane takes off and lands successfully, because it happens all the time. Right? There's nothing exciting there. You see on the news when a plane crashes, right? Because that doesn't happen very often, and it's terrible, and the consequences are bad. And a lot of times there's someone that was at fault. Maybe there was negligence or something like that. It's kind of the same, with this. Like, yes, there have been horrible scenarios where franchisors have taken advantage of their franchisees and defrauded them. They're very few and far between. And you also have these types of things in every industry out there, right? Every type of business that you could consider getting into, you will be able to find horrible stories and horrible examples of fraud, right? So the fact that the FTC regulates this is a good thing. And in Dave's defense here, he's speaking to someone that's considering taking their business and franchising it. And I can kind of see his point, right? Like, you do need to be aware, like, hey, you're going to have to, abide by these FTC regulations if you want to be a franchisor. But if you're on the side of the table where you're considering buying a franchise, um, these FTC regulations are there to protect the buyers of franchises. That's largely what they are in place for. And so what that does is it gives you so much more insight into what the opportunity is that you're actually looking at. I don't know of really any other business opportunities that you could look at getting into where you have as much insight into what to expect than you do with a franchise, because of this franchise disclosure document that Dave is referencing, right? So the FDD is something that every single franchisor has to file with the FTC. They have to update this document at least once a year. It has a very detailed breakdown of what they call the estimated initial investment range, right? So that you're coming in eyes wide open in terms of how much capital do I realistically need to get this business up and running. That estimated initial investment range per the FTC regulations is required to account for a minimum amount of working capital, right? So this is not saying, hey, this is the bare minimum that you need to get your doors open for business. This is, hey, here's how much capital you need, plus, a nice cushion to make sure that you can cover the expenses to operate your business until you've had enough time to ramp up and you have, enough cash flow to sustain. You get data based on, the financial performance of the other franchisees. And if the franchisor is running their own locations, their own affiliate or corporate locations, you get all of that data as well. Data is not a perfect predictor. It's not a guarantee of any specific results, but you at least get a really good idea of, like, okay, what does good look like in this business? What does average look like? What does below average look like? Whereas if you're just starting your own business, right? Yes, there's ways you can do research. You can look at competitors and things like that, but there's no regulation on any of that. People that are out there buying existing small businesses, it's not really regulated, right? In terms of, hey, here's my financials, here's my P&L and L and my balance sheet. Nobody's really regulating, like, how accurate are those numbers. I've seen so many examples of people that have bought an existing business thinking they were getting one thing, and then 3 months into it, they're like, "What the hell? This is not what I thought I was getting." And so anyways, my point is, just because of all the regulations in franchising, if you go through and do your due diligence the right way, there should not be any major surprises on the other end of becoming a franchisee. Major surprises in terms of, oh my God, I had no idea that I was going to have this fee, or oh my gosh, I had no idea it was going to cost this much to get the business open.